All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
I don't know what you have prepared, but I have a few thoughts on kind of the election process in general
Hmm.
and just the frustrations from a normal person that sees big picture things. And it's just, I hate to use the word because people think of the election squad debate we had a few years ago, but the whole
Hmm.
damn thing's rigged. And I wanted to go over some of the things that have put that in the forefront of my mind. But what did you have today?
I didn't really have much. I had a few random ideas from stuff we talked about last time, and then I got busy and tired and depressed and didn't want to do anything. So
Well,
I just
speaking of
kind of need
last
a.
time, the 1 in 4 LGBTQ episode, I just gave it a listen while I was driving to the store the other day, and it's actually a good episode. So go back to that one, guys. It's short. It's got some
Mhm.
good information. We're real concise and clear in what we talk about, and it's actually a take I actually actively looked for, and I could not find. So if you want original thoughts out of us, there's an original episode for you.
Uh, Speaking of unoriginal thoughts, at least unoriginally, I haven't heard anyone talk about this specifically, but we've mentioned before how, and this will kind of, in a way, preview my preview of season 2 of Wheel of Time, is how boring uh modern postmodernism is making art.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because when you're so obsessed with pushing a message, you don't craft a compelling story.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as an example, I went and I saw Mission Impossible the other day because it looks like it's leaving theaters surprisingly quick. And given how Maverick did, I expected it to be around for a while. But it actually looks like it's about to be done domestically, and it's going to have to bank on international sales. Um, but it was really good, surprisingly so in certain ways, in that it it touched on modern topics without being preachy. Because basically the main character is kind of this nihilist who's trying to help this AI take over the world. And so it touches on some modern stuff without being preachy. But the scene that was most impressive to me that I wanted to point out is this scene that uh, Tom Cruise has a fight scene with the only person in the movie shorter than he is, which is this Korean girl. Um, but by by not being beholden to an ideology. Now, granted, the people who created this movie have their own ideologies, but they're not beholden to it. Their goal, that is there in the background, like it's always been. Their actual goal is to create a compelling story. And so there's this fight scene where Tom Cruise is running, of course, because it's a Tom Cruise movie and it's a Mission Impossible movie. And he's trying to get somewhere, and the bad guy is trying to slow him down, corner him in this really confined alley in Venice, which for anyone who's ever been in Europe knows when I say confined alley, I mean the size of a closet. Okay. So he has no room to maneuver. He's boxed in on either side with this
Spoiler
Korean.
alert, by the way, F for everybody. So
Yeah.
just, I
Well,
mean,
it, you know he's going to get out of the fight scene because it's like a third of the way through the movie. But you've got this Korean girl on one side, and you've got this big thug on the other side, and the Korean girl's got a big lead pipe. So he's outnumbered. She's got a weapon, and he can't maneuver. So it goes along with with what the scene I've always used as an example is the first time we see Black Widow in action in the MCU
mhm.
as an Iron Man 2, and it's a much more creative fight because you've got 5'4" Scarlett Johansson bouncing around there with 200-pound stuntmen. So she's moving, she's being creative, and that's what happens here is the tiny girl is able to land blows on the man because she's cleverly maneuvered him into this very disadvantageous position. and he's only able to get out when he takes out the meathead. And then she gets him in this choke where she's able to use the narrowness of the alley to her advantage to give her extra leverage. But once he's able to get a little bit of room to move, the 110-pound girl's not going to stand a chance, even against 5'4" Tom Cruise.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the nature of masculinity and musculature. But it made for an engaging scene because they were trying to tell a story there.
Mm-hmm.
It's I mentioned the other day that I kind of went on this YouTube rabbit hole of old school wrestling clips and interviews and things, and it started because I accidentally found the clip of Undertaker with Joe Rogan from a little while back. And when you listen to the guys who were really good, like the Stone Cold Steve Austins, they're not talking about wrestling. They keep talking about crowd psychology.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes a compelling match. Yeah, you want to be able to have some, athletics there that make you go, oh, whoa, check that out. Same thing with a fight scene in a movie. Yeah, it's really cool to see Jackie Chan jump through a ladder, but it's not just that he pulled off that stunt, it's that he is uniquely and creatively using this ladder as a tool, as a makeshift weapon. He's telling a story there. You can't do that if you're married to this rigid CRT postmodernist ideology that says disadvantaging the historically oppressed, even in fiction, makes you an ist.
Mm-hmm. To me, that takes so
there.
Yeah. Well, so if you really look at it, and this is the problem with the postmodernist movement, is they don't really look at things. They look at something and they see it surface level. They think they're deeper thinkers than they actually are. Because if you actually look at the way they're doing it, you're taking away your argument of oppression. If women are able to stand up toe to toe with a male, there's no such thing as patriarchy, because that's the advantage we had. Any advantage men had in the history of the world is because we're bigger and stronger. And the real patriarchy is when a society uses that, a male portion of the society uses that to subjugate women. You take away that argument if you put forward the notion that they can do everything we can do better, because now you've taken away any power we would have had over you. So there's no such thing as a patriarchy. Your surface level, you go girl boss bitch, took away your argument for the deeper seated issue that yes, men are bigger and stronger, and if we allow them to use that to take power, that's not necessarily a great thing. But who am I? I'm not a postmodernist professor, so I guess I have no expertise here.
Clearly not. Of course, then neither do they, which has been a problem for postmodern CRT, DIE, all this other stuff. It's all just offshoots of 100-year-old religion of postmodernism. It's not new. It's just packaged differently. And where there has long been criticisms of the postmodernism and its ilk is that to your point, you aren't as deep as you think you are, because philosophers and scholars for millennia have asked the questions you're asking, but then they go deeper. You stop there. You start with that surface level, hey, this thing isn't fair, this thing isn't right, and then you act from that. You don't think, why, what, who. You don't ask follow-up questions and then dive deeper.
Yeah, and then they disguise it in the argument of, well, we want young girls to feel like they can be more, But to me, that's like the old days when we were doing real self-defense training. You actually, when you do real self-defense training, the first lesson you learn is you're weaker than you think you are. You don't know the experience of your opponent. You don't know what they're capable of. So therefore, you should do everything you can to avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. You don't fight fair because you don't know. and he could be smaller than me, the guy in the bar. My Uncle Joe was smaller than me, but he was a Green Beret. Right? That's that's not the best indicator. He could be twice my size and be a big giant teddy bear. Right? You don't know anything about the person trying to hurt you. So the best course of action is to not have action. And
Yeah.
defense is the last of the 3Ds: detect, awareness; deflect, cause a scene so there are witnesses and someone bad won't do something bad to you; and defend. Everything else didn't work.
Mhm.
It is time. And guess what? There's no rules. He's got eyeballs, he's got a throat, he's got nuts, and I'm getting one of those three and I'm getting out of here.
Yep. Yep. End it fast and then get out.
Yeah. Now
Uh,
we need to do an episode because I just had this thought this morning and I didn't have time to prep it because I know you talked about Mission Impossible, but I was thinking about the writer's strike and everybody saying good because movies suck. The writers, just get rid of them and blah, blah, blah. I actually am curious, and I don't know if maybe people you listen to have dug into this, but the writers that are on strike is part of their strike because they want to be more woke, or is part of their strike because they want to be creative again?
from everything I've been able to tell, they want to be more woke and they want more protections for their wokeness.
Okay, because that's an interesting angle. Because if it is they want to be more woke, well, good riddance. Because you're not creative anyways. The reason you need a writer is for a creative bend. Because not everybody can have that kind of detachment from their own life to be able
From
to write something good.
from what I understand from some of the people I've listened to, one of the points of contention is that they want to the writers the Writers Guild wants to enshrine something that's already happening, which is that you don't have a writer, you have a writer's room. They want to lock that in and expand it so that every show would have a room with a greater number of mandated minimum writers on the staff, and not to make things better, but to protect the diversity hires, quite frankly, to have more diverse backgrounds, diverse opinions, well, not really opinions, but more diverse people, and to lock that in
Well, and
with a
so
certain
so
minimum.
I've been reading James Lindsay and Pincourt's uh, counter woke Wokecraft. Yeah, that's it. Counter Wokecraft. And to see, this describes one of the strategies of the critical social justice movements is they actually create these group environments so they can rule by consensus, and they use shame to make sure they always win the consensus. They hate secret ballots. Secret ballots are bad because people can actually speak their mind.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you do things publicly, people are more likely to just keep their hand down, right? Or put it up depending on what the proposal is. So yeah, they're trying to create that environment where they can create these mini struggle sessions to basically get their way on the project.
Well, and this is a thought I've been had and wondering where to squeeze it in here is I haven't heard anyone else mention this, that what is happening now is rather surprising with what's happening with Disney and what happened to Anheuser-Busch. Um, but people have been wondering for years now since the term came about and people started saying go woke, go broke, and it hasn't happened. Why? Well, because who's actually pushing the wokeness? Vanguard and BlackRock.
Mm-hmm.
Vanguard and BlackRock have such huge assets, ludicrous amounts of assets under management, to approaching the GDP of medium-sized countries. They're subsidizing the wokeness. So that is a problem for both consumer and producer, because the producer is no longer reactive to their own consumers. You see this with the news media. MSNBC doesn't have even remotely the audience that would make it profitable. It is a loss for NBC. No doubt. There's no arguing that. NBC is owned by GE.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't care. That's not where they make their money. So you don't have to be responsive. The
Well,
Disney
let
is
me give you
supposedly,
a
yeah,
better example, because do you watch Outkick Sports? Because I know you're
no.
what's his face fan,
Whitlock, I know.
Whitlock fan. He's on that, but Clay Travis, the other guy on there, is constantly in a Twitter battle with Mark Cuban, and Mark Cuban throwing his woke stuff out, Travis countering. But I've tagged him in it, and of course they have teams, and I'm like somebody with 10 followers on Twitter, so they're not probably looking at my stuff. I probably look like a bot, but it's I'm just like, you're not getting to the real argument. The reason he's keeping this argument going, Cuban being he, keeping this argument going, and y'all are just going tit for tat on one-liners, is because the underlying issue is the NBA makes more money in China than it does in the US. The underlying issue is that he needs to keep China happy, because Mark Cuban is one of the best business persons in the country. And I support capitalism. I support him making as much money as he can, but I also support it from a point of honesty. And if he says, hey, look, yeah, we're doing these things because China likes it. And what happens in China when people in the NBA, owners in the NBA, players in the NBA do something that China doesn't like, that the CCP doesn't like, they stop showing them. So when Ines Kanter was talking about the Uyghurs, they stopped showing any game that he played in. Oh my gosh, all of a sudden he got cut. He's playing all pro level basketball, and he gets cut and not re-signed with anybody because they won't show the games that he plays in China, and they lose all of that revenue.
It is something I wish had taken hold more. And I think you're kind of starting to see it with the BlackRock, Vanguard, and the Disneys. And you start looking at what percentage ownership those asset managers have of these worst offenders when it comes to wokeness. But then that has been going on for decades with China. The reason the NBA and Nike and Adidas and Reebok don't have to be as reactive to American or even Western consumer demands is because China is so much, not necessarily bigger. They're just willing to react harsher. America is still the number one economy in the world. China is still, for now, something of a distant second. But because they are run by a single party entity, the Chinese Communist Party, they can react harsher. They can react with greater impact, because you don't need a boycott movement like you had here with Anheuser-Busch, and to an extent Disney as well.
And on the reverse side, you're not going to get the counter to that, which is a grassroots movement like we saw with Sound of Freedom. So you don't get the boycotts, and you can't have the counter movement, the grassroots movement, where they're at. So the impact is all or nothing.
And China has been doing this with businesses for decades, and has been doing it with our politicians for decades.
Well, and also
politicians don't have to be responsive to us because they get so much money from China. Not directly necessarily, but it's that influence.
Well, when we talk about BlackRock and Vanguard, so let's stay domestic here. Well, why would they make less money on a movie to put woke propaganda out there? It's because the woke propaganda, remember, this is all a distraction. This is all a division technique to keep us from looking at what's really going on. And this is actually going to segue into what I wanted to talk about, because so what did they break even on Little Mermaid or whatever once they went international? It just got to even after it went international. That's not good. Breaking even, you want to double, triple your money on a movie.
Yeah, especially
everybody's like, oh, well, they made their money back. They didn't go broke. It's like, well, you're trying to make money. But here's the thing. BlackRock and Vanguard, of course, they're the shareholders there, and they're the stakeholders there, but they're also doing things that they don't want you to see, like buying up all the houses in the country and driving up the property values across the country. So that way you're property taxed out of your house. If your property taxes go up so much, you can't afford to live there. So you sell it off and you take the first bidder to come along, which BlackRock comes in a little bit over asking price, buys that house. But that little bit over asking price raises the comps. So the next house on their appraisal goes up and their property taxes go up. And so basically they're removing home ownership by raising people's values so people can't afford houses. So now if you're a 20 something going into the, you just got your first job out of college, you want to start home ownership, you think you got a good salary, but oh my gosh, that house that used to be $250,000 is now $600,000. Well, guess what? Your income isn't relatively improved based on the relative to the housing price. So they're pricing people out of home ownership, but they don't want you to see that. They want you fighting over Black Mermaid. And that's what we're doing. Now, the way that segues in to what I wanted to talk about is Governor Abbott is trying to eliminate property taxes in Texas. And also he's combating ESG scores, and he ran into a wall with the ESG scores, but he's deep thinking enough. And this is why the more and more I look deeply into what we do here in Texas, other than the abortion ban, I more and more actually like Abbott, which I know you have your frustrations with him, but I think he's actually a deep thinker, or at least the people around him. Or so he couldn't combat it directly. So now he's like, well, how are they getting this power? Well, they're pricing people out of the market with property taxes. So guess what? The original intent of property taxes was a good thing, because it was like a local communal support of your school system and everything. But now we've gone too far, because first of all, that money's not being used for that anymore. And second of all, these companies have figured out a way to use that to price people out of home ownership. And what's the point of property taxes if you have no home ownership, right? So he's actually combating it indirectly through that. So fill in your thought, and then I'll pull us into what I want to talk about the rigged system.
So get in the Wayback Machine, and for anyone our age, you remember the big thing in the 80s and early 90s was Japan. Japan was going to destroy the US, was going to overtake the US economy, was going to destroy the US economy. And the big headline was the car industry, for two big reasons. One, because the US automotive industry has this heritage as the world leader, because it was for the longest time. But two, because they're highly organized, just like I was ranting about China. So they were able to put a spotlight on this. The accusation was that Japanese car companies were dumping product in the US at a loss in order to bankrupt American companies, and then they would hike everything up once they had a monopoly. That's not how business works. Businesses can't do that most of the time.
Yeah, I was going to say Twitter's an example of how they do it, but
what was actually happening is that the Japanese were, one, just much more efficient. They got a lot more per worker, and two, they were willing to accept not a loss but a lower profit margin than American companies either would or could. Now, there were some shenanigans on both sides, and that was the government interference and the government manipulation of imports and exports. That's where the shenanigans were happening. That's where the Japanese car manufacturers could afford to be a little fancy, take a little less, focus more on exports, even though and succeed because they had a very small domestic market. And then same thing with the Americans. They were playing that game. They were not able to keep that up for long, because eventually you just don't have the leverage. If your leverage is coming from politics, then when the political winds blow, you're going to have to find something else to do. Well, these companies, the Vanguards and the BlackRocks, have started to become like a whole economy because they have so many assets under management that they're able to say, well, all right, so our Disney stock has lost half its value. Well, yeah, but look at what we're pushing over here and here and here and here and here that's going to keep us afloat and thus subsidize Disney. It's how China is able to exert so much leverage because they aren't just the auto industry, which for a long time that was the export of Japan. So if you could put pressure on that, you could put pressure on the Japanese government. China is basically the manufacturer for the whole world in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So they are manufacturing so many things for so many industries for so many countries. They have more political will than the Western countries that they're trying to oppress, that they're trying to influence.
Yeah, and we'll see how that plays out with the population collapse issue that's going on, because manufacturing takes productive workers. And now we see how they're solving it in some ways. They've got these mines in the Congo, and they've got the Uyghurs, and it's not necessarily the best way, but we'll see how that plays out. But Japan was wait, let me go back to my original thought. What was my original thought? Damn it. I waited too long to say something. I wanted you to finish yours.
The distraction.
Yeah, the distraction. But China on the consumer end, your point of it being a monolith is the issue, because, say I have an international business and only 10% of it goes to China. Well, if I do something to piss them off, if you're an international market, 10% of your income is big.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking multi-billion dollar type deals here. So you're not going to drop that there. If I tick a country off that is not as monolithic as that, you may lose 3 of those 10%. But if I take a country off that has that kind of control, I lose all 10%.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's not bigger than my other markets around the world, if I piss off Americans and I get 40%, NBA is a great example. If I get 40% of my money from China, 30% from the US, and then the rest is distributed throughout the world, then I'm giving up all of that 40%, where I'm only giving up maybe 10% of the US market because we did something that pissed off all the old veterans or something, right? Where the NFL, you see, they even though it started there with the cap thing, they have a soft play. They're like, we're going to do just enough. We're going to do just enough to satisfy these people, but not so much that we're going to lose too many viewers, because their market's like 80-20, 80 in the US, 20 distributed throughout the world. And China, not so much, because for some reason, the average height of 5'5" and 150-pound guys doesn't really play to the football crowd very much. So I don't know why it plays to the basketball so much, but I guess it's because it's an easy sport for people to just put up something and play.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's when you're dealing with markets, if you're going to lose all from one thing, it's going to be more impactful than a free society where you'll only lose the people you absolutely piss off.
Mm-hmm. And who are paying attention enough to,
one,
paying attention enough to know, and then 2, care enough to do something about it.
Well, let's talk about the rigged system, though, because it's all connected, because the system is rigged because the money involved gives you the exposure, and the people who pay for the advertising determine what's on the news. And this is the story that everybody's getting. So again, we try to take things in a unique direction, but I'm going to start with the story everybody's getting. And this was kind of what got my brain going again, is RFK being refused Secret Service, right? So he's refused Secret Service, even though it's customary for serious presidential candidates to have that. Now, there is a 120 day from election or something clause that's the required. And the administration is saying, well, you're not in that 120 days, so we don't have to do this. So we're not going to, even though it is kind of customary and unwritten rule. To me, that sounds like conceding the election before you actually have to hand over the keys, but that's a different story. So we've got hypocrisy across the board. So this is the story most people are talking about. And when we look at the events around RFK, you see a colluded effort from the media to really make him not a serious candidate. because they want the status quo on the uniparty side. I
Mhm.
mean, the Democratic Party side, the DNC. But now let's go to the RNC. And this is something I've been mulling over in my head for a long time. And the RFK stuff has really just put it at the front of my mind. DeSantis and Abbott. And this is one of the things that has been pulling me forward, because what are your complaints about Abbott when it came to the coronavirus? Your complaints as a Republican Texas voter.
So far as I know, he still hasn't repealed the emergency order. So we're
But
just not
at the time,
adhering to it. Oh, um, at the time was that he was going along with what everyone was. And I think we've both said, like the experts we cite, like the, Malone's, McCulloughs of the world, of, look, for sure that like 2 weeks to flatten the curve, 2 weeks to let's get a handle on what the heck is going on. Okay, because it was new, it was scary. And then after that, okay, can we start acting with some common sense here instead of just doing what Fauci and the media say we're supposed to be doing?
So I've got some timelines here. Here's the Texas timeline. And when it flips over, here's the Florida timeline. On every major thing, businesses opening, new reopenings, he actually pardoned the person who went to jail for the thing. They're ahead of Florida. But all we hear is DeSantis, the free state of Florida, the free state of Florida, the free state of Florida. Texas opened schools earlier. Texas got businesses going earlier, including bars and gyms and all of those things that are considered luxuries. And yeah, Texas was ahead of everything. And the complaint about Abbott was, or the talk about Abbott was, he was putting his finger to the wind and seeing where the sales were going. But he was ahead of DeSantis. What the hell was DeSantis doing? I'm going to open up and da 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 da. He was probably doing the same damn thing, but we got a different story because he's being put forward as this presidential candidate. And we were getting the media grooming for that from the beginning, even though he was behind other people doing the same damn thing and taking the same stand. In
I
fact,
think Iowa was ahead of both Texas and Florida. Iowa.
And Texas and Missouri were the leaders in all the lawsuits that were going to the Supreme Court about mandates, not Florida. Florida didn't do a damn thing when it came to action. They just took all the credit for everything. But now you see this media push for DeSantis and everything. And I've heard recently that he's the heel. He's the person that's supposed to unify the Republican Party behind Trump. And you're seeing this big giant corporate push for DeSantis's face to be out there. And now all of a sudden it's being used as a force to push everything in one direction. Well, we all know Abbott kind of had aspirations for something bigger at some time, but he never got any of the attention. And I don't know who the governor of Iowa is, but
Kim Reynolds.
Yeah, you don't see any of that attention being pushed in those directions because they weren't the heel. They weren't the person that the media wanted. They weren't the person the RNC wanted to be put in the mix. And you see the same thing from the DNC. They don't want Kennedy up there in front. So they're doing everything they can to push it out the other end. The whole damn thing's rigged. And it's not rigged in the we're stealing ballots sense. It's rigged in the sense that we're just going to guarantee this person doesn't get everything they need to be electable. And now you're seeing it backfire on DeSantis because now the media is against him. He was a darling for a while when it came to the Republican Party. But now when it comes to the Republican Party, they're bringing up everything he's done to sabotage his own. Now, some of it he's doing on his own, but all candidates do that.
Well, I think that's a couple of reasons. One, because of the way Trump is going after him, and you've got that hardcore 20 to 30% on the Republican side that just everything Trump says is gospel. And it doesn't matter if he's using the tactics of the left, doesn't matter if he's gaslighting, doesn't matter. He said this about DeSantis, so now we're all going to pile on. And then you've got the
then you got the swing vote section of it. Now going hard on DeSantis because they want Trump as the candidate. Because all they're thinking about is the turnout they got against Trump in 2020.
Mhm.
That's all they're thinking about. They're forgetting about the fact that most of those states that had stupid ballot laws have done some legislation to prevent that.
Mhm.
But it's
Well, you've also got the fact that the left wants to attack DeSantis because of the things that he's done, because of
well, he did make himself an easy target by really pandering to this ultra far conservative
I don't
side.
think so. I don't think that's ultra far at all.
Six
And
six week 6 week abortion laws when the state was perfectly happy with the 15 weeks they had. He could have done nothing there, and he would have been one of the more conservative abortion law
that is
states.
that is only the only thing I think you can say where he pandered to the far right. Everything else, and this is laid out, the thing Ron DeSantis should be saying that he's not, the tack he should be taking is, you know, thank you, Donald Trump, for endorsing me. If it weren't for your endorsement, I just squeaked by in my win in my first term. That's the truth. He won by 30 or 40,000 votes. It was ridiculously narrow. And so you can say Trump's endorsement put him over the top there because Trump, I'm pretty sure, won Florida both times.
Mm-hmm.
Narrowly, but I'm pretty sure he won Florida in 2016 and 2020. So he can and should say that because it's just the truth. And you acknowledge to anyone who isn't a Trump sycophant, but is a Trump supporter, yeah, I get it. Trump helped me get elected. But then in 2022, I think was when he was up for election, I had to run on my own. There was no President Trump. I had to run on what I had done in my first term, and I won by 20%. I went from 30, 40,000 to 20% margin of victory. That says that for the most part, most of the people of Florida are happy with what I've done. And he took on some hardcore left Democrat idols, specifically Disney, the corporate woke, and the teachers unions and the education establishment when he went in there to change how things were done and make sure, I mean, the parental rights bill, that's why that backfired so drastically, because it was what it said, a parental rights bill. But to the left, it's still don't say gay. So they
Mm-hmm.
still want to take him down. So he's getting attacked from the left by the left. He's getting attacked from the left by the right. And then he's getting attacked from the corporate media who don't want him the nominee because of his record, but then to your point, because Trump is so good for ratings.
Mm-hmm.
I think from the right, I think the establishment candidate is Tim Scott.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at recent polls. End of July, Echelon Insights has Tim Scott as the second runner behind Trump. And
Here's why Tim Scott is clearly the establishment candidate. What has he done?
no, Pence is the establishment candidate, but Tim Scott is the next runner-up there.
Yeah, Pence is an establishment candidate, but the reason Tim Scott is in the race and is doing so well is because he has all the establishment money.
Mm-hmm.
He had this ridiculous campaign chest before he announced. That was why he announced, because again, what has he done? You can't think of a thing where his name has popped up except for maybe, some speeches, or except for, oh wow, he really slapped down the girls on The View. He's never done anything that makes you say, ooh, great, or wow, that was offensive. Whatever side you're on.
Mm-hmm.
He's there.
He
The
has
black
been
guy is the
somebody.
most vanilla candidate.
Well, yeah, he's because of that right there that you just said. He's been someone they've pushed into media, so he does a lot of media appearance because the things he says, because we live in this stupid world where we are considering this and we're not like the late 90s and early 2000s colorblind anymore, is he's the black guy that can say these things that someone else can't say because they're not allowed. Right. So he's been pushed forward in that role a lot. And I think he's embraced it, which is a smart thing to do politically. But yeah, the other one I saw here is the same poll a couple days later has Ramaswamy running second. But the kind of the consensus poll, which combines them all, has Ramaswamy in third, but DeSantis dropped like 5 points.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I don't know. Has been dropping a lot. But back to my point from earlier was this thing that he celebrated for, which was the major thing that pushed him to be in the spotlight and to have the 20 point, intro into the primary, was the thing other people were doing and doing better. But he got all the attention. And to me, it just screams there's a push to have him run this role. I think I have it to where you can share if you're looking for something.
I was trying to find the Real Clear Politics average, and I see where here's the individual polls. Why do you make it so hard to find this crap? I'll look for it later. I was just curious what the RCP average was right now. Yeah, there's definitely candidates are going to be pushed, and not for content, not for any legitimate election reason. It is because, I mean, for crying out loud, even the Trump sycophants don't want to remember this, but he wasn't the guy for a long time. It took Trump. I mean, Trump was polling in the single digits after his announcement for a long time. He lost Iowa and New Hampshire. He didn't start to pick up steam for about 6 months after his announcement because, again, Trump sycophants don't want to admit it, immigration wasn't his thing. For 5 or 6 months, all he was talking about was how we make bad deals. We're getting screwed by China, especially. That was his thing. It wasn't until he accidentally said some stuff on immigration and the left and the media lost their mind that he said, "Ooh, I got something here." And he started pushing that. The media pushed him hard because he was good for ratings and because it was assumed there was no way he could win.
Mm-hmm.
Because of his unfavorables. And there were numerous reports that he was surprised he won. That on election night, the campaign was getting ready for its spin of how they were going to spin their loss. They were already putting out feelers for where their next jobs were going to be. And there were numerous reports, not just from the legacy media, but from right-leaning media as well, that Trump was planning his own Fox News after the election. That's what he was doing. He wasn't necessarily in it to win it because he didn't think he could. Nobody thought he could. So much so that Hillary Clinton, once again, she lost because she didn't go to Wisconsin, a key swing state, a single time after the Democratic convention. And in the last, I think it was month, 6 weeks, they started shifting money away and into urban areas that they already had locked up, but they were trying to pump up the vote because they were legitimately concerned that given Trump's base, given who was voting for Trump, that there was a legitimate concern in the Clinton campaign that they could win the Electoral College and lose the popular vote in 2016. All of that has been forgotten. Trump was pushed for the various motives of the corporate entities that run the news. And are we shocked where they're doing it again? People keep attacking RFK and he keeps saying, show me the numbers. I've showed you my numbers that show how the cable news media is bought and paid for by Pfizer.
Mhm.
I have given you the numbers. You've just said I'm a liar. Where are your numbers? And
Yeah,
they
and
can't,
and
and they
that's the
won't.
disturbing part about the whole rigged system is it's rigged because of the funding to these networks, right? So it's no surprise who are the candidates that are not getting the coverage or getting actually negative press? RFK Jr., Ramaswamy, DeSantis at the moment. What are their stances on Pfizer? What are their stances on the war in Ukraine? What are their stances? The three things those three have in common are too much pharma money in the government. The deep state has needs some checks and balances, and we're spending too much money in Ukraine, and we need to resolve this and get it done. Those three candidates have those three things in common, and yet they're the pariahs right now. Do
Or
the
being
math.
ignored. I don't know what it's like where
Now
on your
Trump is the
news
outlier because
sources.
he actually has the same stances on those. He on most of those, at least mostly the same stance on those. But he's already become a force that it doesn't matter what the media says.
How much Ramaswamy's kind of getting ignored by the conservative media that I pay attention to.
Yeah,
Um,
because I do so much independent media, he's really popular
okay.
amongst that. I mean, he's getting that's how he's making his rounds. I mean, he's on Timcast, he's on
Yeah.
Dark Horse,
The
he's on Peterson, he's on.
the point about the rigged system here was actually the one answer he gave when he was on Timcast that I was disappointed in because I think there's a better answer. Yeah, I understand that you want to use every question you can to promote yourself, but the question about uh late in the interview when I think they were getting audience questions and someone asks, look, you're independently wealthy, you're a billionaire, you can fund your own campaign. How do normal people who want to do something get into this? And he didn't have a great answer. Um, because I think the answer is start small.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you want to do something and you see a place where it's needed, your school board, your sheriff, some places have police boards that are
The
run
problem
by
is
elected
even the
civilians.
problem is even starting small. Eventually, you need backing, and either you're a crooked politician and you make money in office and you fund yourself, or which probably gets you the backing of the parties.
Mhm.
At some point, if you're trying to build up, you still need the backing of the
But
party. And he comes in from a perspective of I'm an outsider. And there was no good answer to that because either you become super independently wealthy like me and come in as an outsider, or you find some way to get the backing of your party
no,
while
I
still trying to do the right thing.
see. I disagree because um, a lot of those local positions, the party shouldn't matter. And there are some places still where there is no party affiliation for some of these more local municipal elected offices, frankly, as it should be. And if you live in a small enough district and you don't have the money, but if you can make the time, you can get a list of all the registered voters who are going to vote for you for school board or sheriff or dog catcher or whatever, where you can actually make an impact for yourself, your family, and your neighbors
No,
just
I
by going
agree.
door to door.
I agree with you. You can start there, but at the same time, if you're going to make an impact like he is, the question was based on how do you make a large impact, and that's the thing. You can start at the school board, you can start at the city council, you can start at all of those things, but at some point, you need the financial backing. And again, there's two answers: you become independently wealthy like he is, extremely independently wealthy like he is, or you go along with party politics because that's how you get the party money.
Well,
And
but this is again where I would disagree because I think the problem is looking at the eventually. Don't look at the eventually
mhm.
because what we need right now, we don't need a whoever you think is the savior, RFK Jr. or Vivek or DeSantis or Trump. That savior isn't going to save us. What we need are 50,000 people who are non-woke, anti-woke, whatever the rest of your politics, to lock things, to return sanity to the local level. That's what we need more than anything. Frankly, I think the attacks on DeSantis for, oh, he's disloyal, that's stupid. The more cogent point should be, you should be putting all of your focus into locking Florida into where it is now, making sure that when you're gone, because I'm pretty sure Florida is your term limited after 2 terms. Uh, Once you're gone, it isn't immediately undone. I would much rather have, you know, 20 Ron DeSantis's and Kim Reynolds and maybe begrudgingly Greg Abbott. We would be way better off with 20, maybe even 15 of them than whoever you think is the savior in this presidential race. And the same thing holds down the line from that state level down to the municipal level of, look, just focus on that and do what you can to hold the line and then reverse the insanity at the local level. And it will presumably trickle up. It will have to at some point. And even if it doesn't,
Well, except that I think the federal government is doing everything in their power to make sure it never can.
yeah, well, but that's the reason you need people in those positions, because to a certain extent, the federal government doesn't have the power it exerts, because it exerts its authority mostly through money, and then the people actually enacting the federal regulations are actually state and local officials who are being bribed or coerced with federal money.
But so much of what's going on is top down, and it's going through the bureaucracy of the state and local entities, like we saw with the last election. These election laws, we're not going to talk about, fake ballots or anything like that, but the election laws changing made a huge impact. Mm-hmm. And these bureaucracies made their decisions because our legislatures didn't do their job. But yeah, they were basically doing the bidding of the federal government to make sure all of these changes took place. I don't know, that's are we being hyperbolic, or are we in that pivotal moment where the power consolidation of the federal government is outpacing the grassroots to do this small thing, and everybody do it collectively to stop it?
Well, I think
are we being outpaced here? Because what happens if they pack the court? Well, now the judicial system doesn't work, right? What happens if they get a grand majority in the Congress and the Senate and the executive branch? Now you can legally pass laws that the judicial branch can't overturn because it's done in the congressional sense. So we it always seems like we're right on that point, but when is the actual time that it happens? We've seemed like we're on that precipice for a long time, but when is the year that we take that step and we fall off the tightrope? Right.
Sooner rather than later, I think, with the way things are going.
Well,
there's a precipice somewhere.
I think
close
technology
by.
has sped up everything is the problem. So
It's true.
all these things that used to take 100 years, or in the way back of 500 years for a civilization to go through these steps, it almost seems like we're in a decade moment where we're doing these things because things travel so fast.
Well, let's pause for a second while I take care of something, and then I have a question for you that actually ties into that.
Okay,
that
perfect.
I teased last time. All right, so I kind of teased this last time about bringing thoughts from our respective news outlets to kind of burst each other's bubble. And this is one that I've been thinking about for a bit to bring up with you. And I think it ties into what we were just talking about there with the uh look, there are no easy solutions here. I think, yeah, we need a focus local. We need people who are anti-woke and and have strength of character to resist both the crazies and the political establishment at the local level. But that that idea has its own problems. And I think that's illustrated by something that the guys on the Steve Deace show have been saying for a while, and I'm curious your response, that it's revival or bust. And they're speaking of the like the grand old fashioned Protestant tradition of revivals. They're talking about, like, if you remember the term from your high school history, the Great Awakening. There were two of them, really, of major religious movements and religious revival movements through the United States. That what is ailing us is far more than just political. There is a spiritual component that, if it is not addressed, it doesn't matter what your political solution is. And this is something that came up quite a bit because I hadn't heard him speak in long form before. So I was kind of surprised of Vivek Ramaswamy speaks a lot of spirituality and a higher power. And he did quite a bit in that Timcast interview, especially since I guess there's someone on there who's a Bible thumper. So he kept
Famous.
bringing it up. Yeah. So he kept bringing it up. But I'm curious what your thought is. And while you're formulating your thoughts, this is another reason I think RFK Jr. is so compelling, because in a lot of ways he's saying the same thing, just using different language. Because when that town hall a month ago or whenever it was, where there's this clip that's going around where the interviewer is clearly either trying to get him to blast on Trump or get himself blasted by praising Trump, when he
Mhm.
talks about, Trump Trump praising you, and he just completely undercuts it and denies the premise and goes off in his own direction. And he talks about the train ride back after his father was assassinated.
Mhm.
And what he's talking about there is something spiritual. It is that this isn't political, that there was a moment here where we came together as fellow citizens, as neighbors and families, to collectively mourn someone who we respected, even if we disagreed with him. And he's basically talking about the same thing that, Deace and Ramaswamy are, just using different language.
Yeah, and this is where I agree mostly. I don't think it has to be religious, but this is what I talked about this last time with the national identity. When it comes to, there is a place for nationalism, and what can be expressed forward is, this is these are the positive traits that it means to be an American,
Mhm.
right? We believe in individualism. We believe in liberty, freedom of speech, the Bill of Rights. That's a step, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to say the 10 Commandments. We got the Bill of Rights, and they cover almost mostly the same things, right? You're free to have the pursuit of happiness. Well, someone stealing from you limits your ability to pursue happiness, right? So you're free to life. Someone murdering you takes your life, right? But also self-defense allows you to preserve your life. So we have already the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to go by. I don't see why we need any more, but we need to get back to it. We
Well,
can, and this is where everybody, so I'm going into the psychology department, and you hear so much about stigma. You don't want to stigmatize this, or people aren't going to seek help, or you don't want to stigmatize this because it makes them feel bad and it's going to make them worse in their situation. Well, we also don't do the reverse of that, where we celebrate, not celebrate pride, celebrate good behavior.
mm,
Celebrate the things we have control over. You know what? You haven't had a traffic ticket in your entire life. Guess what? Low auto insurance rates. There you go.
Mhm.
You're an upstanding citizen. Guess what? We're gonna have upstanding citizen day. I'm just throwing shit out there, but the premise behind it is the same. Why don't we, 4th of July, we celebrate that because it celebrates the bravery of the people who signed this document that sealed their death. And in
Mhm.
fact, most of them still died from assassinations after that were sponsored by the British. So,
And their families as well.
and their families as well. So we celebrate these things, and we need to celebrate good behavior. And good behavior being defined as the things that support every individual's pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That I don't think it has to go any further than that, because you can attach any religion to that, and they all have those same premises.
Where I
Up
think
until
the
the point that they don't, like, you're gonna have your 40 virgins in heaven if you strap this bomb to your chest. And
where I think the spiritual component comes in, and where the spiritual awakening needs to
okay, so let me cut you
impact
off on that
is
one,
okay.
because that way I can be make this a shorter discussion. Spiritual to me means something greater than yourself.
Hmm.
And if we that's the mentality we can go forward, but something greater than yourself is the nation you live in as well. The community you're a part of. So I don't think it has to be a supernatural thing. I think it just has to be something greater than yourself, because left to your own things, it's easy to be selfish. It's easy to just take the easy road. But when you're part of something greater and you actually benefit from being part of something greater, which we all do, now we're meshing the individual with a greater good. And if we celebrate the good, then you're actually better on an individual level if you do the good, right? And I think that's the mentality we have to go forward.
The 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 problem with that though is that you're forgetting
You have
what
to have buy-in.
Sapolsky,
You have to
well,
have buy-in. Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
but as you're forgetting what Sapolsky said, which is you're the oddball. Okay. The fact is that human nature being what it is, the overwhelming majority of the overwhelming number of people are going to be more fulfilled, more directed, more bought in, more inclined to the good if they are attached to some sort of religious movement. So the other point, last point I have on this is that the the point of um the point of the spirituality in connection to politics is found in those opening lines of the Declaration of Independence when they talk about rights with a capital R. They come from nature and nature's God. There has to be some kind of spiritual component, however you define that, because what makes the US exceptional, and where the conservative movement failed in explaining this in the last, few decades, is that in other Western countries where you have rights, those rights are granted by the government. The US, since its inception, said, no, no, our natural rights as human beings come from a higher power. Government did not grant us these rights. Governments were instituted among men to protect these rights.
Well, and I'm very aware that I am the minority in my belief, and that adding that supernatural element can help people attach themselves to it a little bit harder. I think you can do it in a way that is universal to both. Because if I speak to something greater than myself, that speaks to somebody who's religious and non-religious at the same time. Like you said, rights by nature and nature by God. Nature is the good stopping place for me, because I've already explained my life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in reference to nature.
Mhm.
If I just am thrown in the middle of the desert, I have the right to look for water, to look for food, to look for shelter, and preserve my life. I am free to do that in any way, shape, or form I think is the best way to do it. And liberty, freedom is already in interwoven with those things. And the moment you come to me and try to take my shelter and my water and my food, well, then your rights cease to exist, because now I can defend myself. So these things are universal, whether I'm thrown in the middle of a desert or I'm in an urban environment, right? So there is something greater than just me, because it's universal. The rules apply to us all. And you can put that message out there in exactly the way you said in the Declaration of Independence, where it actually is universal to religious and secular alike. And you don't have to add that extra element to the end of it. Well, that's why you should be religious. That's why you should believe in God. That's why we need Jesus in the Constitution. You know, we don't need that. We can do it to a thing that appeals to everybody. And if at the end of all the universe, the Christians were right, well, good for you. You know, if at the end of the universe, if the Muslims were right, well, that's going to suck for a lot of people, but good for you. If at the end of the universe, the Buddhists were all right, well, there is no end of the universe, because we're going to keep being spewed back out into whatever primordial soup ends up being the next thing, right? So it also gives that autonomy, where if I make a decision, when I have complete freedom in that decision, I am going to be more likely to stick to whatever choice I made, because then I'm going to start justifying everything about the decision. And if we can convince the American people to make the decision that there is a greater good, and here is what it means to be good, in a very free and open way, then everybody's going to be invested in that decision. That's part of the party politics right now. Is people they're very smoothly getting people to invest in the thing that is opposite of the other side. Well, I see this is one reason I like RFK and I like Vivek, is they're getting people they're trying to, I should say, getting people to invest in something that unifies people.
Yeah, I think that's why they're so dangerous. And I think it's why, you know, going back for a minute to where we started, it's really why I think DeSantis is struggling, where there was so much optimism when he first announced. He hasn't found his message yet. Like again,
and
Trump,
realistically, his rise to recent power, not his original governorship, but his rise to recent power, has been a message of we're not them. And that worked in Florida.
Well, more than that, though, because again, his second election, he won by 20 points. That's a ludicrous margin. It's anywhere, but especially in Florida, where the hanging chad was invented.
Yeah, but we got a them that is becoming obsolete. We're the free state in a COVID world, and the thems are the Californians.
Well, no, but it was, that's why I pointed out Disney and the schools, because that's, I think, really where that 20% came from. Was if you look at what was happening all over the place, you know, and the good old attorney general said you're all terrorists. What was happening all over the place, and DeSantis actually helped lead a fight to, okay, we're going to do something about this in the schools, and he followed through. So the normal establishment thing would be to have a bunch of good talking points about Disney, but then you don't actually follow through once the heat dies down, and he actually followed through. The problem is, you can run locally and even on a statewide level of, I am ruthlessly efficient at executing the policies that you like. You can't do that on a national level. You need a brand. You need a slogan. You need a message. So Trump's message, for all of its whatever you think about it, when he got onto, the wall is the thing, and especially when he got onto and we're going to make Mexico pay for it, that spoke to something. That was shorthand to the people he was talking to for all of these ways, as we played the Michael Moore clip, all of the ways these people think you, the establishment, have screwed them.
Well, there's
a shorthand for that.
There's a little bit of recency bias too, and this is why I think COVID had more to do with it than the Disney and the schools. Schools in the woke sense, not the schools reopening is part of what I'm talking about. Is everybody in Florida that benefited from his COVID policies was in it. It's different had he been a wannabe governor coming in saying, I would have done these things differently and this is what would have happened, when they were exposed to something else. So now he's on the national level got to win over Pennsylvania, who were in hardcore restrictions for a long time, or even they were kind of middle of the road. They weren't as bad as California or New York, but they were middle of the road. All they know is what they were in. They don't know what it was like to live in Florida. And all of these people that were prospering in Florida because he opened up, at least at the near the head of the pack of states, same with Texas. Abbott won by a landslide, even though, hardcore conservatives like yourself were pissed off at him. But all we knew was what was happening. All we knew was what we were in. We didn't know what it was like to live in New York. The only people that knew that were the displaced people that came down and saw the difference. But you're winning over that person that stayed in New York. Now you're winning over that person that stayed in Pennsylvania. Now you're trying to win over that person that stayed in California. And you don't have the benefit of people living through the things that were good. And knowing that, because they can turn on the news and see what was happening throughout the country and be like, glad I live here.
Yep. Oh, my brain hurts now.
Yeah. Well,
I don't like thinking about primary politics, let alone talking about it.
Well, I almost
so
think primaries are more important than the national, because primaries put forward who is at the national, right? And to illustrate this, in 2020, we had the choice between Trump and Biden.
The best America could do.
The best America
fills me with
could do.
confidence.
But now, if we pay attention,
I'm inspired.
Yeah, there was no opposition to Trump on the right. But you look at what was on the left. How many of those candidates would be so much better than Biden right now? Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew Yang, who else was there? That was okay.
I don't remember. It was a big field.
It was a giant field.
Yeah.
But yeah, had we paid attention more to that, what would have been the end? If this guy that's not even kind of all there, but corrupt as hell, even when he's not all there, wasn't in power, would we be having this discussion? If it was somebody who came out and actually did what Biden was supposed to do and just be milquetoast the whole time,
return to normal.
Yeah, return to normal. But no, he went full left. He embraced the woke ideology. He had Dylan Mulvaney interviewing. Have you watched that interview with Mulvaney interviewing him?
No.
I don't think he knows what he was even hearing, because the questions were like, oh, well, we're denying trans people health care. No, you're denying 3-year-olds transitioning. That's not denying trans people health care. But he was like, oh, we need to do everything in our power to make this available to every American because it's their choice. And And I'm just like, you're not understanding the questions that are coming into your mouth here, so it's.
There's a part of me that, as much as despises that Dylan Mulvaney is a thing, secretly thinks and hopes that this is the greatest comedic con since Andy Kaufman.
Oh, for about 2 years now. Poole has been saying Mulvaney is actually just a spoof, a hoax.
Part of me wonders if that's what it started as, and then it blew up, and he said, "Oh shoot, I can make some bank
a raging narcissist." And I can say he, she. I'm not dead naming, because actually claims to be fluid. So but I don't
remember who I was watching.
Like Blair
some
White
early
stuff.
Clips.
They'll talk about
They'll talk about early clips,
the bulge. It's like, if you were a real trans person, this is the thing about body dysmorphia, is that bulge actually bothers you. That's why you want to have it cut off. You don't go out parading it and talking about this is a girl bulge. This is
I don't remember who I was watching that played some really early clips, and it was like, did I just hear that? Something along the line was something along the effects of, it's my 6th day living as a girl, and I've already, gone gone shopping 3 times and changed my mind 4 times on what I'm gonna have for lunch. You know, it was something like that. I'm like, did I just hear that? That is anyone else hearing this?
Yeah, it's all like it's actually very misogynistic tropes being
Yeah.
portrayed, you know. Uh I saw another headline. It was man gives birth to twins after or trans man gives birth to twins after da 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 da. And it's like, okay, so if we're going to define masculinity and femininity, wanting to have babies probably puts you on the feminine spectrum. So if we're going to define gender in this spectrum of femininity and
You would
masculinity,
think, yeah.
yeah, the fact that I want to be pregnant and give birth to children is kind of the most feminine thing you can do.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't set a standard. If you can think of a standard more in that direction of the bell
One would
curve than
think.
that, yeah. I don't care if you got a mohawk and giant biceps and a freaking sailor tattoo, anchor tattoo on the side of your arm. If you want to have babies inside of you and give birth to them, you're a girl.
Well, on that note, I'm being assaulted by a toddler girl, so I should probably call it there.
Yep.
And
We did an hour and a half. That's not too bad for us.
we'll
So
we will pick back up Friday night whenever I get there and
oh
we
yeah, we're
talk
doing
Winter's
something a little
Heart.
different. So if you watch both, Wheel of Time might come out Saturday morning because Friday night he's driving into my place and we're going to try a setup where we're using 2 cameras and laptops. And so we'll be sitting across from each other, but you'll get both mics and both points of views and everything. So we're going to try that. If you don't see that, that means it didn't work. And you'll get the normal us sharing the mic and talking into it and stuff. So either way, we're going to get the Wheel of Time in Friday night. The production value could go many different ways.
All right, well, we'll see y'all then.
See you later.